Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a stroll through ancient Rome, but not to admire marble columns or watch gladiators bash each other's heads in. No, we're headed down the back alleys. You know, the kind of alley that always seems wet, even though it hasn't rained in weeks. The air's thick, acrid, a little sour. You wrinkle your nose and realize the smell isn't rotting. It's fermented, sharp. There's a tang to it that stings your eyes a little. Welcome to the world of Roman laundry, where your tunic might be wider than Caesar's ego, but only because someone stomped on it in a bucket of warm urine. Yes, tonight's journey isn't about emperors or epic battles. It's about the quiet, squishy work of the full ones, those brave Roman souls who handled everyone's dirty laundry. Literally. And as you'll see, this wasn't some lowly ditch job. Well, okay, maybe technically it was. But this was organized, essential, and oddly respectable work, assuming you didn't mind getting your feet wet. And probably yellow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere across the empire, drop your city and local time in the comments. I'd love to know who else is drifting off in the middle of history's least glamorous chapter. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start on a stone-paved Roman street, your sandals clicking against worn slabs. On either side are multi-story insulae, those dense apartment buildings stacked like loaves of bread. The air is warm, a dry Mediterranean breeze barely moving through the alley. Somewhere nearby, water trickles, maybe a fountain, maybe just a leak. You pass a narrow archway and suddenly catch the scent. It's unmistakable, something between vinegar, ammonia, and that time your cousin left eggs in the car for a week. Ahead, a man in a filthy tunic hoists a clay jug onto a stone basin. Steam rises from a sun-warmed vat. He doesn't flinch, just stirs the contents with a long wooden paddle. You found the fullonica, the laundry of ancient Rome, and it's open for business. Inside, the place bustles. There are no washing machines, no soap suds in sight, just long stone basins filled with sloshing liquid and workers, ankle deep, rhythmically stomping like they're pressing grapes. Except instead of sweet wine, this brew is part water, part clay, and a whole lot of human urine. You wonder, as most sane people would, why? Why would anyone clean anything this way? The answer lies in chemistry. Urine contains ammonia, a powerful cleansing agent. Even without understanding the molecular breakdown, Romans knew this stuff could strip grease, lift dirt, and whiten fabric. And they used it in a way that was equal parts genius and horrifying. The clothes, when in dirty, got soaked, stomped, rinsed, and believe it or not, came out clean. By Roman standards, anyway. The full ones didn't just wash laundry. They processed cloth, prepared it for dyeing, and even helped preserve wool garments. They were tradesmen, not just launderers, essential cogs in Rome's bustling textile economy. Their work kept togas crisp, tunics presentable, and customers satisfied. Well, most of the time. Still, you can't help but feel for the guy in the corner, trying to scrape some mystery stain off a senator's tunic with a handful of fermented ash paste. His nose hasn't worked in years. Outside, life bustles on. A mother drags her son past the entrance, hurrying him along with a cloth pressed to her face. "Don't look, don't sniff," she says, and you almost laugh. Because while it's all part of daily life, the stench of the fullonica is legendary. Some historians still argue whether the fullonica's fumes were strong enough to carry several blocks. Others claim they were tucked away in industrial zones. But archaeological digs have uncovered these laundries right in the heart of cities, sandwiched between homes, bakeries, and temples. So if you think your neighbor's barbecue smoke is bad, imagine the sharp aroma of a dozen men stomping through yesterday's chamber pot. You wander deeper inside. A boy lugs in a full amphora marked with wax, today's delivery. Another worker uncorks it, takes one sniff, and nods in approval. "Fresh," he says with a grin. That grin fades, though, as he tips it into the basin. The smell punches you in the throat. Someone nearby gags. The boy doesn't even blink. You wonder how long it takes before your nose gives up. Probably not long. Historians say that Roman cities were full of smells, baths, perfumes, incense, garbage, fish sauce, sweat, animals. In that noisy symphony of odors, perhaps even urine-soaked linens didn't register as that offensive. Then again, Roman poets made jokes about it. Martial, in one epigram, ridicules a man whose cloak still stinks of the fuller's tub. You pay to smell like that, he jeers. So maybe even in their time, people knew better than to lean in too close. But here's the twist. The job of full ones wasn't shameful. In fact, it was regulated by guilds. They had protections, guidelines, even rituals. A fuller could join a professional association, pass on his trade to his son, and make a living that supported a whole family. And unlike some of Rome's more brutal labor, mining, galley rowing, or sewer maintenance, this job didn't necessarily destroy your body. Your dignity, perhaps. Your sense of smell, absolutely. But not your bones. Outside, the day cools into evening. A few fresh tunics hang on wooden racks to dry. Pale and stiff, they flutter in the breeze. You reach out to touch one. Crisp, clean, smells faintly of citrus and something else. Best not to think too hard. You linger at the edge of the alley as a fuller dumps another bucket into the street gutter. It sloshes past your sandal in a little golden stream. You take a cautious step back. Welcome to Rome. Cleanliness is complicated. So, you've had your first whiff of the fullonica. Maybe your nostrils are still recovering. But let's stick around a little longer, because tonight, we're not just peeking in from the street. We're going to step into the very sandals of a Roman fuller. You wake before sunrise, when the streets are mostly quiet and the urine buckets haven't yet been knocked over. Your tunic smells faintly of last week's batch. The stiff apron tied around your waist is stained the color of yesterday's grime. You trudge across the stones, careful not to slip, because one wrong step near a leaking amphora and you're bathing in someone's contribution to the cause. The fullonica where you work isn't glamorous, but it's solid. Stone basins carved with care. Hooks for drying. A little shrine to Minerva in the corner, where someone's placed a single fig and a wax candle stub. You nod at her. Even the goddess of wisdom knows this job takes brains. And a lot of grit. The full ones, plural for fuller, are your crew. These aren't desperate street dwellers. They're trained artisans. Some were born into the job. Others apprenticed. Some, like you, probably started as bucket boys, hauling amphoras up and down slopes until your arms look like overcooked sausages. You got bunions. You got calluses. You got a weird burn on your ankle from that time the ash mixture exploded. You've also got job security, because Romans, they care about clean clothes. A sharp toga means respect. A well-maintained wool tunic means status. Your work speaks for the people who wear it, which means that your dirty job is the foundation of someone else's dignity. Weird, right? You start by checking the vats. There's one for soaking, one for stomping, another for rinsing. The liquids inside look like muddy tea. Frothy, vaguely yellow. The stomp vat is the worst. It's deeper, and you'll be in it for a while. You sigh, tie your tunic up higher, and step in. Your feet squish down into cloth and liquid. It's warm from yesterday's sun. You begin to tread. Left foot, right foot, heel, toe, a slow shuffle that churns the mixture. The cloth beneath your soles is a tangle of tunics, stolas, sashes. You feel them shift as you move, like sluggish seaweed in a bog. Another fuller joins you. You nod without speaking. There's a rhythm to it, this laundry dance. A beat that becomes background music in your head. Sometimes someone hums. Sometimes a worker from across the alley starts shouting gossip. Who kissed who behind the Olive Cart? Which senator's wife is back from the baths with a whole new face? You smile. The fullonica is loud, it's smelly, but it's alive. At break time, you rinse your hands. Not that it helps. and bite into a barley cake. Dry, but keeps your stomach from growling. One of the senior full ones is arguing with a client outside. The client swears his toga was whiter last time. The fuller swears the man's diet must have changed. You sweat differently now, he says deadpan. Too many dates. Inside, you get back to work. There's more to this job than stomping. You need to prepare the cleansing mix, water, fuller's earth, a clay-like substance, maybe some alkali ash from burn plants. And, of course, the hero of the hour, urine. Some of it is collected fresh. Some is aged like fine wine. The smell changes with time, you see, gets sharper, more potent. You might chuckle, but you also know this makes the ammonia more concentrated. Historians still argue whether fullers preferred young, urine, or mature. Some inscriptions suggest that different vats used different ages, almost like wine pairings. Imagine it. Today's soak uses last week's best pee from the baths of Titus. Fancy. You also learn how to read fabric. Is this wool or linen? Has it been dyed? Does it need whitening or softening? And, crucially, is this one of those clients? The kind that inspects their clothes like a gladiator's blade and complains if there's a wrinkle out of place. You put a little more care into those. Maybe a sprinkle of sulfur to brighten the whites. Maybe a citrus rinse. Yes, that's a thing. Romans loved citrus for cleaning and scent masking. You check the hooks along the drying wall. Sunlight streams in from high vent. The garments sway slightly in the breeze. They look clean. You know they're not pristine by modern standards. But they don't carry dirt. They don't reek of the street. They've been treated with skill, time, and more bodily fluids than you care to count. You take pride in this in a quiet way. Fullers weren't mocked in public. In fact, many own their own shops. Some are freed slaves who built businesses, passed down trade secrets, and earned respect. Their work was regulated under Roman law, too. There were standards for how clothes were handled, especially sacred garments or official togas. In Pompeii, archaeologists have uncovered fullonica with mosaics, frescoes, and even wall ads. One painted sign near a laundry reads, "The best fullers in Pompeii. White your tunic here." You chuckle. Ancient marketing, alive and well. There's even a certain kind of poetry to it. You take what's soiled, what's discarded, and through messy, smelly, repetitive labor, you make it useful again. Maybe even beautiful, like alchemy, but with more foot fungus. A client returns to pick up their laundry. They sniff it cautiously. Crisp, they say. That's high praise. You nod and accept the payment. Maybe a coin, maybe some fresh figs. Barter is still big in this part of town. As dusk creeps in, the alley fills with shadows. You drain the stomp vats, scrub the basins with a horsehair brush, and hang your apron on the peg. Your arms ache. Your nostrils have given up. But the work is done, and tomorrow there'll be more. You head home through the evening streets, sandals slapping the stones. Behind you, the fullonica quiets down. A cat pads across the threshold, pausing to sniff and immediately regretting it. You can still smell the day on you. And strangely, you don't mind. Before the fullers could stomp their way through piles of soiled tunics, someone had to provide the most vital ingredient in their cleaning process, urine. And that's where your next job begins. You're now a collector, a proud, if nasal suffering, member of Rome's informal pea economy. Your morning starts earlier than most, not with roosters, but with sloshing. You haul 2 empty amphorae and a wooden yoke onto your shoulders. The streets are still dim and damp with dew. Most of the city hasn't stirred yet, but the latrines, oh yes, they're already bubbling with business. The Roman system for public hygiene was both ingenious and a little gross. Public toilets, or fullonica, were dotted around the city, especially in busy districts. There were stone benches with keyhole openings, lined up like ancient urinals with a view. Below ran a constant stream of water, sometimes from an aqueduct, sometimes just from reused bath water. Patrons sat, chatted, did their business, and then wiped with a sponge on a stick. We'll save that lovely detail for another night. But here's where it gets interesting. The urine didn't just vanish into the abyss. Collectors like you worked with fullers or municipal staff to gather the stuff. You'd place large clay jars near toilets, baths, alley corners, anywhere people might feel the urge. In some neighborhoods, you didn't even need a sign. Everyone knew the drill. Pee in a jar, not on the street. You lift the first container. It sloshes with a lazy gurgle, and you wince. Already half full. Someone had a good night at the tavern. You pour it carefully into your amphora and keep moving. By mid-morning, the sun's up and the jars are heavier. Your shoulders sore. A passing child plugs her nose and yells, "Stinky man." You bow graciously. It's all part of the job. Sometimes you swing by bathhouses. These were treasure troves of bodily fluids. Hot rooms, cold rooms, steam chambers, it all got the body moving. Bathhouse attendants might let you gather the runoff for a small fee. Or, in some cases, you split the profits. Here's where the empire gets clever. Urine collection wasn't just tolerated. It was taxed. Enter Emperor Vespasian, the ruler famous for putting a price on, well, pee. Vespasian came to power in a shaky moment. Rome was broke after a civil war and a disastrous reign or two. He needed funds. Fast. So he looked around and thought, what's plentiful, always flowing, and technically free? That's right. Human waste. He reintroduced a tax on public urinals and urine collection, especially from the fullonica. If you were gathering urine to sell to fullers, you paid a fee. Businessmen groaned. Philosophers mocked. But Vespasian just shrugged. His son, the future Emperor Titus, supposedly objected. Really, father? We're taxing urine. So Vespasian held out a coin and asked, "Do you smell anything?" Titus shook his head. "Exactly," Vespasian replied. "Money doesn't stink." That phrase, pecunia non olet, became a Roman proverb. And honestly, it's a pretty good tagline for tonight's story. Historians still argue whether the urine tax was wildly profitable or mostly symbolic. Records suggest it helped fill the state's coffers, but also stirred a kind of begrudging respect for biological entrepreneurship. You weren't just a pee collector. You were a tax contributor to the Roman economy. A golden citizen, if you will. You stopped by a private home. Wealthier households had their own arrangements. Wealthy clients might even donate their own urine to their preferred fuller, almost like giving blood to a favor hospital. It's gross, yes, but it's also kind of intimate. A servant opens the door, nose wrinkled. "The jar's full," she mutters. You swap it out, tip your head in thanks, and cart the contents away. You make one last stop, a back alley where workers from a bakery usually relieve themselves. Sure enough, the jar is nearly bubbling over. You gag as you pour it into your final container. Done. Time to deliver. You reach the fullonica at midday. Your shoulders ache, your arms smell like defeat, and your toga's beginning to crust. But the fullers are pleased. One of them sniffs the fresh batch and gives you a rare compliment. Strong. That's basically a medal. They tip you a copper coin and a withered date. You accept both gratefully. By now, you know the routine. Amphorae are lifted and poured into vats. The newest batch will be added to yesterday's, aging together like a fine vintage. The mixture will be stirred, stomped, and used to scrub tunics, togas, and tunic sandals that have seen one too many Senate debates. You sit in the shade of the fullonica's wall and exhale. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work. And strangely, the city depends on it. Without collectors like you, the fullers wouldn't have the tools they need. Without fullers, Rome would be filled with stained, smelly citizens. The whole operation runs on a cycle. Unsanitary by modern standards, sure, but efficient in its own way. Nearby, a fuller accidentally knocks over a bucket. It spills in a little stream across the cobblestones. You hop up just in time. Crisis averted. The sun climbs higher. The city roars with life. Vendors shouting, chariots clattering, musicians tuning their lyres. But here, in your corner of Rome, the ancient wheels of industry churn on, powered by something no one wants to touch, but everyone seems to need. You grab your empty jars, sling the yoke back onto your sore shoulders, and head off down the street. Eyes alert for the next full jar waiting to be picked up. Money doesn't stink, after all, but your hands definitely do. You've gathered the liquid gold, lugged it across town, and passed it into the eager hands of the fullers. Now it's time to meet the man who figured out how to squeeze every last coin out of Rome's strange little industry, Emperor Vespasian. You're standing in the forum, the midday sun blazing off white marble and bronze. Vendors hawk olives. Senators swish by in spotless togas, probably thanks to some poor soul soaking fabric in a bucket of warmed ammonia as we speak. High above you, a statue of Vespasian gazes down with a distinctly smug expression. And why wouldn't he be smug? The guy found a way to tax something that literally poured out of every Roman citizen daily. And people paid it. Vespasian wasn't a flashy emperor. He didn't come from noble blood. He was the kind of guy who worked his way up through the military, grunted at extravagance, and probably muttered things like, "Do we really need marble floors in the latrine?" But when Rome's treasury ran dry after the chaos of Nero and the year of the four emperors, he rolled up his sleeves and looked around for opportunities. Urinals? Opportunity. Public toilets, known as Vespasian's. Yes, he literally named the latrines after himself, became taxable real estate. Not the marble structures, not the location, the contents. He levied a fee on the collectors and fullers who profited from what these humble bathrooms produced. Now imagine trying to pitch this tax policy in today's world. Let's tax bodily fluids. Why? Because we can. Historians still argue whether Vespasian's urine tax was pure genius or just desperation. Some say it was symbolic, an emperor showing he could squeeze revenue from the lowest of the low. Others think it genuinely brought in consistent income, particularly from cities where the fullonica industry thrived. Either way, it worked. Rome stabilized. Roads were repaired. Grain supplies became less erratic. And all of it funded, in part, by puddles and alleyways. Vespasian even defended the tax publicly in that famously dry way of his. The pecunia non olet moment? That wasn't just a witty remark. It was a worldview. The money might come from filth, but once it's in the imperial purse, it smells just fine. Of course, not everyone appreciated the sentiment. Philosophers, predictably, sneered. Stoics in particular bristled at the idea that Rome's virtue could rest on something so pungent. But they still used the public toilets. Some citizens also tried to dodge the tax. Fullers might pretend their ammonia came from private donations, or fudge the volume they reported. One inscription recovered near a workshop reads something like, "No tax on gifts from the gods." That's either satire or creative accounting. The government, for its part, occasionally cracked down. Officials were known to measure vats, inspect contracts, and make sure collectors were licensed. There's even evidence that urinals were marked for tax purposes, scratched symbols or wax seals denoting ownership. Imagine being the bureaucrat assigned to inspect the pee jars. Truly, Rome had a job for everyone. But while the collectors and fullers paid the fees, the structure of the tax subtly reinforced Vespasian's power. Everyone, from the rich man washing his toga to the poor boy hauling jars, participated in the emperor's economy. You couldn't escape it. Even your body, in its most basic function, owed a little something to Rome. Now, let's not pretend this was the empire's only strange tax. There were others on beards, windows, funerals, and even, for a time, the number of steps and staircase. But the urine tax stands out because it took something base and rebranded it as essential. You walk past a urinal tucked beside a bakery. A collector crouches nearby, checking his clay jars. He nods politely, then mutters something about the good stuff coming from bakers. Strong yeast diets, apparently. You keep walking. You've heard enough. Nearby, a fuller is hauling 2 amphorae into a shaded alley, where a vat bubbles faintly. He doesn't flinch. You watch him work, pour, stir, step back. The stink hits you like a slap. He wipes his hands on a damp cloth, then turns to greet a customer. A merchant, judging by the fancy sandals and silk sash. The two men exchange a few words, and money changes hands. Just another day in the empire. That's the part that sticks with you. The casual, transactional nature of it. Nobody's laughing. Nobody's ashamed. It's business. As legitimate as pottery, as honorable as farming, and in some cases, more reliable. Later, you pass a public latrine. It's surprisingly elegant. Columns, tiled floor, little niches for oil lamps. Inside, men sit shoulder to shoulder, chatting about the weather, politics, maybe the chariot races. One of them waves over an attendant and points to a nearly full jar near the exit. Collector's late today, he grumbles. The others nod. It's a strange moment of realization that the entire city, in some small way, revolves around this cycle. From the street to the bathhouse, from the jar to the vat, from the stench to the shine. All overseen, from a distance, by a thrifty emperor who never met a coin he didn't like. As you make your way back toward your own insula, the evening breeze carries a familiar tang. You wince, then smile. Thanks, Vespasian. Let's get one thing straight. Romans didn't have soap. At least, not the kind you might picture with suds, floral scents, and pastel colors in a cozy ceramic dish. Instead, they had something a bit earthier and definitely stinkier. You wake to the sound of water being poured into a stone basin. Inside the fullonica, the day is already in full swing. Amphorae have been emptied, fabrics dumped in, and the mixture of ingredients swirling in the wash vat resembles the world's worst stew. There's no olive oil soap here, no lavender sachets or herbal infusions. Just a finely tuned recipe passed down through generations of fullers who knew exactly how to get grime out of wool with whatever was on hand. You step closer to the cleansing station. Here's what's in the laundry detergent. Water, obviously. Then fuller's earth, a soft clay known for absorbing oils. It's pale, silky, and when mixed with water it forms a smooth, paste-like texture. Think of it as Roman OxyClean, if you will. Then comes ash, usually from burned plant matter like kelp, reeds, or wood. Ash contains alkali, which helps break down grease and odors. And then, of course, the grand finale, a generous pour of aged urine. Some combinations included fermented animal fat. Others used sulfur for whitening. In extreme cases, goat bile. If the fabric was especially greasy, say, from a heavy-set senator during a summer Senate session, they might double up on the urine. One of the fullers dips a tunic into the vat. The cloth disappears beneath the cloudy swirl. Then, with an ease born of years of practice, he grabs a paddle and starts mixing. The movement is hypnotic, slow, deliberate circles. He hums a little tune under his breath. His tunic sleeves are rolled, but you still catch a splash mark or two on his arms. He pulls the fabric out and holds it up to the light filtering through the vent. The stains are fading. The smell? Well, we'll get to that later. The Romans understood the science behind all this only in a practical way. They didn't talk about pH balances or enzymes, but they knew that letting urine age made it stronger. They called it lant, and collectors often stored it in warm corners to speed up the fermentation. Aged urine releases more ammonia, a powerful degreaser, and thus a better cleanser. Historians still debate how standardized these methods were. Some believe fullers guarded their recipes like state secrets, passing them only to sons or trusted apprentices. Others think there were citywide norms, especially in places like Pompeii, where many fullonicae followed similar designs. Speaking of Pompeii, one particularly well-preserved fullonica had dedicated rooms for different steps in the process: soaking, stomping, rinsing, and drying. There were even elevated basins, probably used for rinsing after the urine treatment. And yes, they found chemical traces confirming that the yellow stuff played a starring role. Back in your own imaginary fullonica, You're handed a paddle. Stir this one slowly, the senior fuller says. It's silk. You blink. Silk? In Rome? Yes, imported, expensive, and temperamental. Silk didn't take well to the more aggressive treatments. Urine, it turned out, had to be diluted for such delicate fabrics. Otherwise, you'd end up with a garment that smelled like a gladiator's sandal and felt like cardboard. You stir carefully, watching the liquid ripple. The silk dances in the mixture, lighter than wool, almost ghostly. The smell is still strong, eye-watering, even, but somehow your body's adjusting. You'd never call it pleasant, but it's no longer shocking. Nearby, another worker prepares a sulfur rinse. He heats a pot of water and sprinkles in powdered sulfur, muttering about how the senators always want their tunics white as Jupiter's beard. He's exaggerating, but just a little. The sulfur mix bubbles. He pours it carefully over a pile of rinsed garments, steam rising in gentle wisps. The smell shifts again, now sharp and acidic, layered over the ammonia and ash. A symphony of stinks, each with its own role. Despite all this, the end result really is impressive. After drying in the sun, most garments come out shockingly clean. White wool brightens, linen softens, even tough stains from wine, oil, or who knows what fade into oblivion. Roman society demanded this level of clean. Public image mattered. Whether you were senator, merchant, or matchmaker, your clothing sent a message. Dingy fabric whispered laziness. A crisp toga. That screamed power, wealth, hygiene. And that message started in a vat of pee and clay. Occasionally, wealthy clients would ask for extras. Maybe a light oil rub to soften the fibers. Maybe a citrus rinse. Lemons weren't common, but oranges and citrons were imported luxuries, and their zest could mask even the worst ammonia edge. Some fullers even experimented with fragrances, herbs, resin, sometimes even flower water. Of course, the effects didn't last. Rome wasn't a world of dry clean perfection. By the end of the day, you were back to sweaty, dusty, and vaguely fermented. But for a few shining hours, you smelled like effort. And that counted. You placed the clean silk onto the drying rack, stepping back to admire your work. It flutters slightly, catching a ray of sun. Somewhere beyond the wall, someone shouts about bread prices and a mule braise. Inside, a new batch of fabric is waiting. Another vat, another blend, another delicate balance of ingredients that would make any modern chemist wince. But for the fullers, this was just Tuesday. There's no mechanical hum, no industrial spin cycle, and certainly no delicate setting. In the Roman fullonica, the human body is the machine, specifically the feet. You step toward the largest vat, wide, shallow, stone-lined, and filled with a soupy mixture of water. Fuller's earth, ash, and, of course, the signature ingredient. The fabric has already soaked for hours. Now comes the most labor-intensive part of the process, stomping. The Romans had a word for this practice, fullo treading. It wasn't a job for the weak-ankled. You, and sometimes 3 or 4 others, stand shoulder to shoulder in the vat, each holding a support rope tied to a beam overhead. You grip the rope tightly, lift one foot, and sink it down with a satisfying squelch. Then the other. Left, right. Hail, 2. Over and over. The rhythm begins to settle in your bones. It's almost meditative, like kneading dough with your entire lower body. The fabric shifts beneath you, coiling and uncoiling in the warm sludge. Occasionally, a lump of wool bunches around your ankle. You shake it off and keep stomping. Around you, other fullers are mid-step, mid-squish. No one speaks much. Talking takes energy, and energy is precious here. Now and then, someone breaks the silence with a joke. Usually something about senators being full of hot air, or how this vat smells better than their mother-in-law's kitchen. You manage a chuckle through gritted teeth. Historians still debate just how long a single load of laundry was stomped. Some say up to an hour. Others believe it depended on the fabric, the stain, and the client's ego. A humble merchant's tunic might get 10 minutes. A general's ceremonial cloak? An entire afternoon. And here's the twist. This was often barefoot work. You're not wearing sandals. The Romans believed direct contact helped sense how the fabric was reacting. If the material grew too slippery, it meant over-soaking. If it resisted your step, it needed more agitation. Your soles were sensors. A slip on the smooth basin floor could mean a twisted ankle, or worse, a full-body plunge into a bath of excrement-tinged stew. It happened, and when it did, the laughter was not gentle. Fullers weren't known for their tenderness. The air grows thick. Steam rises in lazy curls from the sun-warmed vat. You wipe your brow with your shoulder, which is already damp from earlier efforts. Every muscle in your legs is awake now, even muscles you didn't know existed. And somehow, you're only halfway through. In the corner of the fullonica, a young boy works the rinse vat. He's new, probably apprenticed through a family friend. His job is to take the freshly stomped fabrics and begin the rinsing process, removing as much of the cleaning solution and its very distinct aroma as possible. The rinsing tubs are filled with fresh water from an aqueduct-fed cistern. The boy plunges the fabric in, swirls it around, then pulls it out to check the color of the water. When it runs clear, the fabric is deemed clean. You glance down. The water in your vat is anything but clear. It's a mix of grays and yellows and browns. It smells sharp enough to make your teeth ache. And yet, this is how it's always been done. In Pompeii, archaeologists uncovered a fullonica with 5 dedicated treading basins. Each had a raised platform beside it, possibly for resting, rinsing, or just catching your breath. Mosaic floors suggest pride in the space, even beauty. Some fullers commissioned frescoes. Imagine murals of people washing clothes. A workplace with decoration. There's something oddly touching about that. In some shops, workers even wore aprons with slogans. One surviving scrap says something like cleaner than your wife's tongue. You smirk. Some jokes never change. You finally lift your sore legs out of the basin. Your feet are wrinkled. Your knees shake slightly. A fellow fuller slaps you on the back. Good stomp, he says. High praise. The stomped fabric is transferred to a flatboard. You help wring out a tunic, twisting it tightly, the liquid running in rivulets across the stone floor. It smells like a barnyard during a lightning storm. You try not to think about it. Once drained, the fabric is handed off to the rinsing crew. From there, it will be dried, perhaps brushed with a rough stone or trimmed with shears, then folded and returned to the client. A full transformation from sweaty mess to social statement. There's no denying the toll on your body. Some fullers develop foot infections, back problems, even respiratory issues from prolonged exposure to ammonia fumes. But the job offered steady income, membership in a guild, and in some cases, enough status to carve your name into stone. The Guild of Fullers, Corpus Fullonum, was powerful enough to host festivals, fund public works, and even influence local politics. They weren't elite, but they weren't nobodies either. You might be ankle-deep in pee today, but tomorrow you could sponsor a shrine. As you towel your feet off and pull your sandals back on, you glance at the next vat, already waiting. The sun is high, and there are at least 6 more loads to tread before lunch. You sigh, then smile, because somehow, weirdly, this is honest work. And let's be real, there's something oddly satisfying about stepping on someone's problems until they disappear. Your legs are jelly, your feet look like overcooked raisins, and the skin on your hands is tingling from ammonia. You've spent hours stomping through sour-smelling vats. But there's no time to collapse yet, because next comes the rinse. You shuffle over to the rinse station, where a series of smaller, cleaner vats glisten under the midday sun. The water here is fresh, fed by a redirected aqueduct stream that flows through terracotta channels into the basins. It's shockingly cold. You dip your fingers in and feel your whole arm tingle. The fabrics you helped tread earlier now sit in a soggy pile nearby, already stained a lighter shade of white. You grab one, A toga that once belonged to a man with too many opinions and too little self-control. It's still got wine blotches near the hem. Classic. You plunge the fabric into the water. At first it resists, then it sinks like an exhausted swimmer. You swirl it slowly, letting the flow pull the last of the clay and urine away from the fibers. Tiny bubbles form, a strange shimmer on the surface. You press it under, hold it there, then release. Beside you, another fuller works in silence. He's older, with hands like driftwood and a nose that's probably been broken twice. He nods at your technique. You feel strangely proud. Rinsing is about patience. If you rush, you risk leaving residue. That means the fabric will dry stiff and patchy. Or worse, it'll smell like it was stored in a latrine. You lift the toga out, squeeze it tight, and hang it from a wooden pole across the yard. The fabric drips steadily, each drop catching the light like a tiny jewel. It's hard to believe that just hours ago, this garment was sitting in a communal slop of human waste. Nearby, the younger apprentice stirs another vat with a long paddle. He's frowning. Too murky, you ask. He shrugs. Maybe, or maybe this will just wants to be brown. Historians still argue whether fullers changed rinse water daily or try to stretch it out. Some evidence suggests that wealthier shops rotated the water every load, while poorer ones kept it until it resembled mushroom broth. Either way, the rinse was crucial. Without it, all the careful stomping and soaking would be for nothing. A few rinses were even perfumed, sort of, not with roses or violets, but with whatever herbs were available. Thyme, sage, maybe even a dash of vinegar. Sometimes a scrap of citrus peel floated in the water, giving the illusion of freshness. Illusion was a big part of Roman hygiene. After all, as you rinse, a few customers arrive to inspect their items. One woman holds up a stola and squints at it. "Did you scrub a neckline?" she asks. You nod. She smiles faintly. My husband dribbles wine when he laughs. That spot's seen a dozen symposiums. You resist the urge to say, tell him to close his mouth. Instead, you nod again, and she drops a coin into the jar at the door. Payment received. Reputation maintained. Not all clients were so reasonable. Some demanded extra rinses. One senator's wife once insisted her garments be rinsed 7 times. She believed it removed the spiritual residue of commoners. You hope she's enjoying her crusty toga somewhere humid. You grab another bundle of cloth. This one dyed a deep red. Here's where things get tricky. Dyed fabrics require a lighter touch. Too much rinsing and the color fades. Too little and it bleeds when worn. You remember one incident where a client sat on a marble bench and left behind a perfect red circle. The bench was never quite the same. To prevent disasters, you gently swirl the fabric, lift it, and press it between your palms. The water runs clear. That's your cue. You hang it beside the others, watching as the garments form a fluttering line in the breeze, like flags of forgotten nations. There's something beautiful about this moment. The chaos of soaking, the exhaustion of stomping, it all leads here. To the rinse, to clarity, to something clean. A colleague whistles as he works. The tune is familiar, something you heard in a tavern once. You join in off-key but content. For a moment, the fullonica feels almost peaceful. Birds chirp from the rooftops. The city hums just beyond the wall. The smell, well, it's not pleasant, but it's less aggressive now. More like an echo of what was. You finish rinsing the last garment and turn to clean the basins. You scrub the sides with a bundle of coarse straw, dragging away streaks of gray. Your hands are raw, but the water soothes them. Cold and pure, the closest thing to a luxury you'll feel today. Later, you'll oil your hands with a smear of goose fat to keep them from cracking. A trick passed down from older fullers. You've seen what years of urine, ash, and wet wool can do to a person's skin. You look back at the drying rack. The togas sway, newly bright. You nod, satisfied. Tomorrow, the vats will be full again. The cycle continues. But for now, everything's hung, rinsed and ready. The garments are rinsed and dripping on the lines, catching every breeze like sails on a sleepy merchant ship. But there's one more stage before you can hand them off to their eager and occasionally fussy Roman clients. Finishing touches. You move toward the drying yard, a sun-drenched space tucked behind the main fullonica. The ground here is packed dirt, dry and warm underfoot. Simple wooden frames line the area, long rods balanced on carved posts. From these hang tunics, stolas, mantles, and the occasional silk scarf. A few pieces are already dry, stiff from the minerals in the water, and needing extra care. First, you check the white garments. They're the showpieces. Romans loved their togas blindingly white. Not beige, not off-white, not natural linen. White. As in, I want people squinting when I walk into the forum. To get that effect, fullers didn't just rely on soaking and rinsing. They had a secret weapon, sulfur. In a small, enclosed side chamber of the fullonica, a low platform sits over a shallow pit. You duck inside, cloth in hand. The walls are blackened from years of fumes. In the pit below, someone's lit a small dish of sulfur. It hisses faintly, releasing a pale smoke that curls upward like a lazy ghost. You drape the togas across the frame above, careful not to bunch the folds. The sulfur fumes rise and cling to the fabric, not just whitening, but deodorizing well in a Roman way. Sulfur wasn't exactly pleasant, but compared to the other options, it was practically perfume. Historians still debate whether the sulfur chamber was used by all fullers or just the ones serving wealthier clients. Some records suggest that only the upper classes demanded this level of brightness. Others argue that even modest citizens wanted their best clothes treated this way for weddings, funerals, or public appearances. You don't have time to split scrolls over it. The sulfur is burning, and you need to rotate the fabric to ensure even exposure. You wave the smoke gently with a reed fan, coaxing it through the folds like a ghostly laundry assistant. Once whitened, the garments go back outside. The sun finishes the job. You squint into the brightness, then shade your eyes with your palm. The togas shimmer, and in your tired mind, they almost seem smug about it. Next, you turn to wool. Dry wool can stiffen, especially after being subjected to your, let's call it, vigorous foot cleaning method. So now comes brushing. You grab a bunch of teasel heads, spiny, thistle-like plants used for centuries to raise the nap of woolen fabric. You gently drag the teasels across the surface, lifting the fibers and softening the weave. It's delicate work. Too rough, and you'll fray the garment. Too soft, and the customer will accuse you of laziness. You hum as you work. The motion is repetitive, soothing. You brush in one direction, then the other, until the wool feels plush again, like petting a well-fed goat, which, in some cases, is not far from the truth. Some colleagues prefer pumice stones, especially on thicker cloaks. Others use bronze combs. You use whatever your fingers tell you to. Then comes folding. And oh, it's an art. Roman garments weren't like today's pants and shirts. A toga, for example, is essentially a giant semicircle of cloth, up to 20 feet wide. Folding it is part geometry, part guesswork, and part interpretive dance. You lay it flat, smooth the wrinkles, then begin the complex series of rolls and pleats. Your mentor taught you this sequence years ago. Fold like Jupiter is watching, he said. You're still not sure what that means, but it works. When done properly, a folded toga sits like a layered cake, crisp, tidy, and dignified. You place it on a polished board, ready for pickup. A small wooden tag is attached to the edge with the client's name scrawled in charcoal. No mix-ups allowed. One time someone left wearing the wrong senator's cloak. It caused a minor scandal. You remember the shouting. Now for the dyed fabrics. You inspect the reds, purples, and yellows carefully. Some dyes fade in sunlight. Others bleed when wet. If anything looks suspect, you touch up the edges with a bit of natural wax or oil to seal in the pigment. It's not perfect science, but it helps. A colleague nearby is pressing folds into a tunic using a heated stone. He lines up the creases just right. Romans adored symmetry and sets them by applying gentle pressure. The result is stunning. From vat to pinstripe pleat, you nod in approval. Even silk gets a final fluff. You don't press it, it's too delicate, but you do flick it lightly with your fingers to release creases and bring back the shimmer. Silk clients are the pickiest. You've seen grown men complain that their scarf didn't feel breezy enough. Finally, you sweep the drying area. Loose threads, bits of wool, even the occasional dropped ring. You once found a bronze earring inside a cloak. Cleanliness matters, not just for presentation, but for pride. As the sun dips lower, the garments are arranged in tidy piles. The air smells like dust, sulfur, and that strange mineral sharpness that only comes from clean wool drying in the heat. Customers begin to arrive. One by one, they collect their garments. Some sniff. Others rub the fabric between their fingers. A few nod, drop coins, and leave without a word. But the best ones? They smile. They say thanks. They notice the neat folds, the gleaming whites, the softness of the wool. And for a moment, you forget how many times you had to stomp through a vat of urine to get here. After a day immersed in the steamy chaos of cleaning ancient Rome's finest tunics and togas, you might imagine the job is done. But the reality is a bit more complicated. You see, cleanliness wasn't just about soap and scrubbing. It was also about presentation, personal style, and, quite frankly, social signaling. You find yourself back in the busy courtyard of the fullonica as the afternoon light softens. Around you, the hustle never truly stops. Some clients demand their garments delivered straight to their homes by runners. Others prefer to pick up in person to inspect every fold and stitch. And because Romans were nothing if not particular, you often become a fabric consultant as much as a cleaner. Take dyes, for example. Colors weren't cheap, and they carried meaning. Purple was reserved for the elite, especially the so-called toga picta worn by generals and emperors. A dye called Tyrian purple came from the murex, sea snail, and was worth more than its weight in gold. Your role? Make sure it shines without fading. You carefully examine a senator's purple toga, noting a slight dullness along the hem. You decide it needs a light reapplication of oil to protect the color during the drying process. The client isn't just paying for cleanliness, he's paying for prestige. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner, a matron fusses over her dyed stola. She insists on inspecting every seam, running her fingers over the fabric like a jeweler appraising a diamond. "Does it still smell fresh?" she asks. You smile, remembering the vats you've stomped in today. Personal scent was just as important as visual appearance. That's why some fullonica offered a little something extra. Infusions of scented oils or herbal sprays. Lavender, rosemary, myrtle. These were the Roman equivalents of modern fabric softener, minus the overpowering perfumes. Historians still debate how common scented fabric treatments were. Some argue that only the wealthiest could afford such luxuries, while others suggest the practice was widespread in urban centers like Rome or Ostia. Either way, the scent became part of the garment's identity. You recall a famous Roman writer who complained that the richest citizens smelled better than they looked, while the poor looked better than they smelled. A humorous jab, but one with a grain of truth. Sometimes, you had to advise clients on how to care for their garments post-cleaning. Rome's streets were dusty, and the city's ever-present smoke from cooking fires meant clothes rarely stayed pristine for long. You'd recommend careful storage, folded, wrapped in linen, and occasional airing on rooftops. Speaking of storage, some wealthier patrons employed specialized servants called vestiplicus who managed wardrobes, repaired tiers, and ensured garments were ready for public events. You envied their cushy gig. Your job was all about transformation, from filthy to fresh. An oddity worth mentioning. Fullonica sometimes doubled as places for gossip and socializing. It wasn't unusual for clients to exchange news about upcoming gladiator games or Senate decisions while inspecting their laundry. The fullonica was, in a way, a hub of community life. You notice a group of fullers leaning against the wall, swapping stories about the latest scandal involving a senator's stolen toga. It's a light moment in an otherwise grueling day. As the sun sets and your shift winds down, you prepare the last bundle for delivery. A runner waits nearby, eager to take the package across town. Before you leave, you glance at the vats one last time. The water has cooled, the fumes have faded, and the space feels momentarily peaceful. You realize that, despite the smells, the hard work, and the odd looks from passers-by, fullers played a vital role in Rome's daily life. Without you and your fellow fullers, the city's fabric, both literal and social, would unravel. The sun is setting over the sprawling city of Rome, casting long shadows over the cobblestones and the fading hum of the fullonica behind you. Yet, the story of urine and laundry isn't limited to the eternal city. As you step beyond the gates, you find yourself wandering through the vast Roman Empire, discovering how this peculiar industry adapted to different cultures and regions. In the dusty streets of Londinium, the Roman outpost on the edge of the known world, fullers faced unique challenges. The climate was wetter and colder, making it difficult for clothes to dry quickly. You imagine standing in a damp alley, the smell of wet wool mingling with the nearby Thames fog. Here, fullonica often featured larger drying yards equipped with windbreaks, sometimes even heated rooms where fabrics could be carefully dried over low fires. Unlike Rome's bustling public baths and open courtyards, Londinium's fullonica had to be more enclosed to retain heat. Fullers here sometimes added peat ash to their cleaning mix, an ingredient native to the region, which altered the chemical properties of their cleaning solution. Peat's smoky scent mixed oddly with the ammonia, creating a fragrance that locals described as earthy and robust, which to you sounds like a polite way of saying reeky. In Carthage, once a proud Phoenician city, the laundry trade took on different textures and rhythms. The local climate was hot and dry, perfect for sun-drying fabrics. However, the Phoenician influence meant a different take on dyes and fabric care. You can almost hear merchants haggling over saffron-dyed textiles and imagine fullers carefully treating luxurious silk blends imported from the East. The use of exotic oils and resins added another layer of complexity and scent to the fullonica. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, the bustling Mediterranean port, the industry thrived with influences from Egypt and Greece. Here, the urine tax wasn't as strictly enforced, possibly due to the city's semi-autonomous status and complex bureaucracy. Fullers in Alexandria often experimented with plant-based alkalis derived from natron and saltwort, reducing their dependence on urine. Some even introduced aromatic herbs like myrrh into the washing process, hoping to mask the less-than-pleasant odors. Historians still debate how uniformly the urine tax and fulling methods spread across the empire. Some argue that in provinces far from Rome, the practice evolved independently, incorporating local customs and materials. Others believe the imperial system tried hard to maintain consistency to maximize tax revenue. As you walk through these distant cities, you realize that the fullonica was more than just a place of cleaning. It was a cultural crossroads where Roman practicality met local tradition. The smell of urine might have been universal, but the rituals around it varied wildly. Back in the heart of the empire, you think about how this shared industry connected millions of lives, from the lowliest collector hauling jars in a Roman alley to a wealthy Alexandrian noble choosing her silk scent. No matter where you traveled, one truth remained clear. Urine, in its many forms, was an unglamorous but essential part of keeping civilization's clothes clean. You paused to take in the fading light, the scent of the city mixing with the salt air. Laundry was, quite literally, the fabric holding the empire together. After wandering the empire's vast expanse, your thoughts drift back to the less glamorous, but equally fascinating world of urine collection. Yes, before those vats could bubble with cleaning power, someone had to gather the raw material, the golden liquid at the heart of Fulling's magic. You walk down a narrow Roman street, the early morning light slanting through wooden shutters and balconies. A man in a worn tunic carries a large ceramic jar, its surface mottled and patched from years of use. This is the urine collector, a figure both essential and, let's be honest, a bit unsavory. In Rome, urine was a tax commodity. The Emperor Vespasian famously imposed a tax on public urinals, the vectigul urini, to turn nature's waste into imperial profit. Collection points were strategically placed around the city, often in public latrines or along busy streets. Citizens and slaves alike would relieve themselves into designated jars or pits, knowing that their contributions kept the fullonica running. You might picture a man carrying these jars through crowded markets, dodging carts and shouting vendors, the smell a pungent halo around him. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, the role was often assigned to slaves or freedmen whose social standing was low despite their vital function. Interestingly, some sources suggest that urine collectors had a somewhat strange status. They were necessary, but not entirely shunned. In some cases, they formed small guilds or associations, protecting their trade secrets and negotiating fees. The aging process of urine is a science in itself. Fresh urine is relatively mild, but as it ferments, the urea breaks down into ammonia, boosting its cleaning power. Collectors would store their haul in warm spots, sometimes covered but never sealed, encouraging fermentation. Some collectors prided themselves on the quality of their urine, which depended on factors like diet, age, and storage conditions. There were whispered rumors about certain neighborhoods producing better urine, much like how modern vintners talk about terroir. Historians still debate how formalized this industry was. Was there regulation? Were collectors licensed? Some records hint at a surprisingly sophisticated system, with auctions and quality controls, while others paint a picture of a chaotic and informal trade. In the city, the collector's role extended beyond mere gathering. They often delivered their goods directly to fullonica, ensuring a steady supply. This direct connection sometimes fostered relationships, friendly or fraught, with the fullers themselves. You imagine the daily routine: collecting jars at dawn, negotiating prices mid-morning, and unloading barrels by midday. The smell was a constant companion, at first shocking, then oddly normal. Back then, nobody had air fresheners or disinfectants. The odor was accepted as part of life, much like the clatter of hooves or the chatter of street vendors. You pause beside an ancient public latrine, picturing its stone seats and drainage system. Beneath it, a hidden network of urine collection jars waited patiently for the next pickup. It's strange to think that something so mundane could fuel an entire empire's laundry industry. But then, Rome thrived on the practical and the peculiar. The collector's humble labor was the unseen thread tying together the fullonica's pungent but effective magic. Now that you've pictured the humble urine collector trudging through Rome's bustling streets, let's turn to the fullonica workers themselves and their daily lives beyond the vats and fumes. Despite the stink and labor, fullers were part of a close-knit guild, a brotherhood bonded by the peculiarities of their trade. You find yourself in a dimly lit tavern near the fullonica quarter, where a few fullers gather after a long day of stomping, rinsing, and folding. The air here is thick with the scent of wine, with smoke and tired muscles. Their laughter echoes softly off stone walls. One fullonica worker tells a story about a client who insisted on rinsing his tunics with scented oil stolen from a perfumer's shop. The others chuckle, shaking their heads at the rich man's ridiculousness. Another talks about the latest city decree regulating the placement of urine collection jars, a cause for much grumbling. Guilds like the Corpus Fallonum were more than professional organizations. They were social safety nets. Members shared resources, supported families in times of need, and even organized festivals honoring their patron deities. Speaking of which, the god Minerva often received the guild's prayers. Known for wisdom and craftsmanship, Minerva was a fitting protector for artisans like fullers. Some fullonica even displayed small shrines dedicated to her, hoping for divine assistance in their smelly work. Fullers' reputations extended beyond cleanliness. Their craft involved a deep knowledge of chemistry, fabric, and client preferences. They balanced tradition with innovation, experimenting with new cleaning agents, drying methods, and even scent infusions. Still, the work was exhausting and often underappreciated. A day spent in ammonia fumes took a toll on lungs and skin. Many fullers suffered from chronic ailments, though their sturdy constitutions and camaraderie helped them endure. Their pay was modest but reliable. Skilled fullers could save enough to own small homes or pass trades down to children. Some even ventured into related businesses like fabric dyeing or textile sales. Interestingly, fullers sometimes acted as informal mediators within their communities. Their shops, located in bustling market districts, became meeting points where gossip, politics, and local news flowed freely. Clients and workers exchanged stories, complaints, and laughter. Historians still debate how much influence the fullers wielded socially and politically. While they weren't senators or generals, their guild's organizational strength and economic importance gave them a voice in urban affairs. After a round of cheap wine and shared jokes, the fullers eventually rise to leave. The night air greets you as you step outside. The city quieter now, but still alive with distant chatter. You realize that behind every crisp toga and soft stola was not just urine and ash, but the sweat, skill, and spirit of these dedicated workers. Their story is as much about community and resilience as it is about ancient laundry. As you leave the Fuller's Tavern behind, your thoughts turn to the cultural footprint of fulling beyond Rome. The Roman Empire was vast, and the basic practice of urine-based cleaning found curious echoes and adaptations across its territories and even beyond. You picture a bustling market in Gaul, where Celtic influences mingle with Roman traditions. Local fullers here might have used urine from different animal species, mixing it with plant ashes or mosses common to the region. The climate's dampness meant drying required indoor racks near hearths, adding a smoky note to the finished garments. Over in Hispania, Roman laundry merged with indigenous customs. You imagine a laundry worker using local herbs like rosemary or lavender not only to mask odors, but also believed to have mild antiseptic properties. In some coastal towns, salty sea breezes aided in drying, imparting a faint mineral tang to freshly cleaned togas. In the eastern provinces, places like Syria and Judea, fullonica often integrated methods from ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian washing traditions. Here, soap-like substances derived from plant ashes and animal fats were more common, supplementing or even replacing the urine vat. The unique mix of scents and textures would have made these fullonica distinct from their Western counterparts. Interestingly, the tradition of using urine in fabric cleaning did not end with Rome. Centuries later, in medieval Europe, similar methods persisted in parts of France and Italy. Some fullers even stored urine collected during the night, believing it fermented into a more potent cleaner by dawn. Across the world, other cultures used different natural substances to clean textiles. In Japan, for example, rice bran and ash were common. In parts of Africa, natural clays and plant extracts played similar roles. Though the ingredients varied, the principle remained: nature's chemistry, harnessed by human hands to bring fabric back to life. Historians still argue about how much knowledge transferred between cultures. Did Roman fullers influence these distant practices, Or did similar solutions arise independently? The answer might be a bit of both, a fascinating testament to human ingenuity. You imagine the countless hands that have worked cloth through the ages, using whatever tools the earth provided, turning dirty rags into symbols of identity and status. It's a quiet legacy, less glamorous than battles or empires, but woven deeply into the fabric of human history. You smile, thinking about how something as simple and odd as urine once played a crucial role in this global story. Back in Rome, as the empire's heartbeat pulsed steadily, you realize that fullonica were about more than cleaning clothes. They were hubs of early urban industry and innovation. Imagine the early morning, the city stirring to life, and fullonica lining the streets like humble factories. The sounds are not unlike modern laundromats. The splash of water, the rhythmic squelch of stomping feet, and the occasional murmur of conversation. Behind the scenes, fullers experimented constantly. Some developed tools to scrape fabrics clean, bronze combs, wooden paddles, and stone scrapers, all designed to lift dirt without damaging delicate fibers. Others tinkered with chemical mixtures. Ash from burnt olive pits, lime from crushed seashells, and even stale wine found their way into cleaning recipes, each adding a subtle effect. You imagine a fuller's apprentice carefully measuring ingredients, mixing with practiced hands under the watchful eye of a master. Precision mattered. Too much ash, and the fabric became rough. Too little, and stains lingered. Historians still debate the exact recipes and techniques used. Some argue that many fullonica guarded their secrets fiercely, treating recipes like family heirlooms. Others suggest a culture of knowledge sharing within guilds. The infrastructure behind the fullonica was also impressive. Sophisticated plumbing systems directed water in and out. Wastewater, heavy with organic material, was channeled into the city's sewage, a stinky but crucial step in urban sanitation. The location of fullonica was strategic, near baths, markets, and residential areas, making it convenient for clients to drop off and pick up garments. Economically, the fullonica sector employed hundreds, from collectors and fullers to delivery runners and clerks. This industry contributed significantly to the urban economy, reflecting the complexity of Roman society. You picture a bustling workshop where the smell of ammonia blends with fresh soap and the chatter of workers. The fullers take pride in their craft, knowing they maintain the city's appearance and social order. As night falls, the fullonica shutters close, but the legacy remains. These workshops laid groundwork for modern laundry services and urban manufacturing. You pause, appreciating the blend of hard labor, science, and social fabric woven into this ancient industry. In a way, the story of Roman laundry workers is the story of civilization itself, finding order amid chaos, transforming the ordinary into something respectable. The day draws to a close, and with it, your journey through the world of Roman laundry workers and their curious use of urine begins to wind down. As you sit back, imagining the final moments in the fullonica, you feel the weight of history settle softly around you. The togas and tunics hang still now, fully dried and smelling faintly of sulfur and herbs, a far cry from the pungent vats they once soaked in. The clatter of footsteps fades, the chatter of fullers slows, and the warm Roman night seeps into the streets beyond. You think of the countless hands that labored here over centuries. The collectors, the stompers, the rinsers, and the folders, all woven together in this oddly intimate story of cleanliness, commerce, and community. It's strange how something so unglamorous as urine could become the foundation for an empire's laundry. Yet, in its simplicity, it reveals a deeper truth about humanity. Our ability to adapt, to find practical solutions, and to endure with humor and grit. Historians will continue to debate details, how widespread the urine tax truly was, which methods were favored, and how these practices evolved. But for you, these questions only add texture to the story. As your eyelids grow heavier, you picture the city under a blanket of stars, quiet now, but still alive. Somewhere, a fuller prepares for tomorrow's work, ready to step once again into the vats, into the smells and sounds, into the endless rhythm of the fullonica. And as you drift off, you realize that every thread, every fold, every breath of fresh-smelling fabric carries the echo of these ancient lives. Sleep well, knowing you've walked with the unsung heroes of Rome's laundry. Wind down. Now, as your mind slows and the quiet deepens, let the warmth of the Roman evening settle gently over you. The echoes of bustling streets fade to distant murmurs, replaced by the soft rustling of drying togas in a gentle breeze. You feel the weight of the day release from your shoulders. The faint scent of sulfur and herbs lingers in the air, a comforting reminder of transformation, of chaos made clean, of effort turned into grace. Rest here for a moment, in the calm after the toil, as your breath deepens and your thoughts soften. The story of the fullonica has carried you through the sights, sounds, and smells of a world long past, yet somehow close. As sleep draws near, remember, even the most ordinary, even the most peculiar, can hold beauty and meaning. Good night and sweet dreams.